Hello and welcome. You're listening to The Power Reclamation Show, where we explore the mysteries, heartbreaks, and resiliency of the human experience. Together, we'll focus on rewilding ourselves through raising consciousness and dismantling domestication. This is a collective journey of challenging hierarchical systems of power over, as well as our own personal conditioning and limiting belief systems. This show is about embodying the power of love, presence, and our own inner authority. I want to just start by thanking you both for saying yes to today. So I want to welcome you both again, Hualani and Marie from Cape Town. And Hualani, you're from Toronto or?
Yeah, just north of Toronto.
Okay. Well, I want to start so listeners know, like, how did we all end up here? And it's interesting because I thought for sure you two knew each other. So we've been on Instagram and we've been interacting in these amazing ways for over a year at least. And recently, someone was going to have me on their show and they asked me, would you send me some questions? And I was like, ooh, like I prefer just to have people randomly ask me questions because I don't like to have it prefabricated. So I put it out there of what would you want to hear if it was you learned about wild power. And I'm not kidding. I don't know if you two know this, but Marie, you responded on Facebook and your list of questions was almost a mirror image of what yours were, Hualani, on Instagram.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, we had already talked about, I'd already kind of been wanting to get together with you two. When I saw that, that's, I think, when I sent the email or the Instagram, I was like, hey, let's do it. Do you guys want to be on the show together? So that started our journey. There was just this clear alignment. And also, you both have spoken about, in different words, being a Black sheep and an exile. And we've talked a little bit about the sisterhood, the wound of that. So again, just to refresh our listeners so they know a little bit more, we met a couple, 3 weeks ago, just to kind of touch in together. And like, if we had a show, what would it maybe be about? Because there's so many topics. And my takeaway from that time was, the overarching theme, which I think we could talk about for hours, is the sisterhood wound, the wound of the feminine, and how there's this whole other arc of embodiment that's needed on all levels. But ultimately, I feel that we were really opening the portal around sisterhood and how do we heal together. And it takes the collective consciousness, and where are the ways that we feel exiled. So I thought we would just begin the conversation today, maybe just really talking about, from both of your perspectives, what is sacred sisterhood and where have we lost it, or how have we lost it along the way? And you can speak personally or how you see it collectively. We'll just start there.
The sacred sisterhood for me is a unified field of love that is embodied in that matrix of being together, whether it be physical or even non-physical. It's a non-physical substance that can be palpated. And through that sacredness, we uphold each other to our highest expression, to the wave of evolutionary impulse that's moving through humanity, as well as through each of us equally, so that we have this reflection of the greatness and genius within us, so that we have this reflection of the feminine genius and its true expression, and so that we have support to meet the challenges of really standing in our truth and power and love as a soul in feminine embodiment in this world that's built on the patriarchal matrix. And to address your second question, I feel it all roots back to where we turned away from the source of the divine, as well as the ancestral woundedness of when women, when we were in our true expression as healers, as oracles, all those more expanded states, when we didn't stand up for each other, when in particular the big story is being burned at the stake, knowing that some women gave us up for their own survival. In some ways that's understandable, but in other ways, if we were really aligned with the divine in our own soul's inner direction, would we have done that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's time to recoup that, to heal that all the way back to its root, and really stand firmly together as the feminine rises in its truth, not in a patriarchal version of its expression.
Thank you, Hualani. That's beautiful. Marie, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, I think in my life, I've always had the sense of this is something, the sacred sisterhood is something I remember on a very deep level, and which is the place or the space we should be heading towards. So for me, it's something that is within the feminine, that we have definitely lost, which shows up in the world. But I feel there are bits and pieces coming together from women, more and more women realizing that they are remembering something extremely important. And the more we talk about it, the more it reemerges. And I definitely feel that since I was a child, I had this longing for something I didn't know what for. And also the stories I was told, for example, in church about the divine or about God didn't satisfy this longing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I could not identify with the idea of God being a father. And this was just something very intuitive for me, which also then meant that I never felt at home in something like a church.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I think when I was young, I did try, because I felt I need a spiritual home. But the older I got, the more I became in tune with the fact that it has nothing to do with religion for me. It has everything to do with what is already here and around us, even though time and space obviously is relative, but it is actually a power that is deep within us and that we have to remember. And it just becomes more urgent the older I get. This is the feeling I have. And I remember reading The Invitation by Orion Mountain Dreamer. I don't know if you know her or
Love
books.
it.
Yes.
And I think I was about 18 or 19 when I read it. And it was the first time in my life that someone actually put into words the same longing that I felt.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one of the things she actually said in the invitation was that she sometimes talks to the grandmothers, that she calls the grandmothers.
Right.
And it was the first time, it was something so simple, but for me, it was total revelation, because it was the first time I could actually identify with what someone experienced as divine guidance, or who to actually approach. Because yes, we all know the divine is you can't paint a picture of it or of us. I mean, it's in all of us. the idea that it's outside of us is we know that's wrong, but just to make it easier as in our human form to address something or someone, it helped me in a huge way to know I can actually imagine the divine as grandmothers and as sitting around a fire and asking them. And suddenly just more and more clarity started appearing in my life, and I understood myself more. Because I was talking about black sheep. I have 3 sisters. I'm one of 4. I've always been black sheep. Well, there's no doubt about it. And I remember, especially my mom was in an extremely difficult marriage when we were growing up. I sensed it since I was very small. And I knew it was my job. I just felt this urge that it was my job to encourage her to be stronger and to stand up against chauvinism or against emotional abuse. And I felt so strongly about what was happening in the marriage. That this was the first time I actually realized how compelled I felt to give back power to the feminine, and to the unfairness surrounding me in the world, especially regarding how some males treat females. And I also realized this was not just happening in my own home, this was happening all around me in other marriages. And I actually, when I was very, very young, I looked around me and I couldn't see one marriage that I would think of as a functioning marriage regarding the masculine and feminine interaction. So coming back to your idea of the sacred sisterhood, for me, it was picking up women or moments with women along the way who I could actually identify with, who realized their feminine side is actually divine, and it is the side that is actually needed in the world to lead humanity to healing. And the older I got, the more I understood that these random interactions I had, or these moments that I had of, if you want to call it, realization, or these moments of enlightenment, are all clues to where I'm heading. And Sacred Sisterhood for me is embodied in what we're doing now, the 3 of you, the 3 of us. And I feel if you feel it's within you, it's your duty to become a part of it and to speak, because there are so many people that need us to say something and that would never have the courage to believe in even something as the Sacred Sisterhood, even though I'm convinced that's something that that is all every woman needs, is to realize sacredness of sisterhood and the feminine divine.
Yeah, I can really relate to that. And with respect to the grandmothers, my real sense of support began in my dreams. Well, actually, that's not true. It began as a child through my grandmothers. One grandmother was one of 13 sisters, widowed very early in her marriage, and ran a general store and refused all suitors. She was determined to do it all on her own. And she was a great reflection for me. But as I really stepped into my healing journey, particularly with respect to the feminine, in my dreams, this gathering of grandmothers would show up, and I'd be led to this cave, deep, dark cave, almost volcanic in nature. And there is this pool of water inside this cave, and the walls had and have, because I returned there, many symbols, very, very magical markings, and they would sing to me, and they would bathe me in this pristine pool, and it would just be so completely loving and supportive that I'd wake from the dream totally renewed and often with inspiration. So I feel that every woman, and actually life and creation on this planet, is held by these concentric circles of grandmother elder sisterhoods that not only in the physical, but also in, like in my case, in the non-physical realms. And often in the shamanic lineages, there is a sisterhood that goes way back, which they're still in tune with. So I think it's very important that you've mentioned this. And personally, with respects to noticing with what didn't make sense to me as a teenager, I was always fighting the norm, always speaking up to. It's like every spring we'd go to the cottage and I would get to wash all the dishes in the cupboards, and my brothers would be out there hauling wood. And every spring I would go, why can't I haul wood? Right? Why do I have to be the one to wash the dishes? Why can't we switch? Right? That's just one example of many. So it's all of this that's waking up in us, where we have this sense of the truth, where the feminine isn't compartmentalized based on old structures and beliefs and ways of doing things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I feel from both of your shares so far, it seems that the undercurrent is needing to remember our belonging. You know, you both are speaking of the grandmothers in this way. Marie, you're talking about it didn't make sense that God was outside of you, but that was the only thing you were given. And so I feel it, you know, this sacred sisterhood, I almost feel like we could take this conversation even to a different level, which is just sacred being, you know, like the belonging. It's not even necessarily, I mean, it is, and we'll come back to this in a moment, but I'd like to know what your thoughts are about, it is about sisterhood and the feminine, but is that gender-based or not? Could men be needing the same thing? Marie's shaking her head, yes.
Powerful
I would love to hear
question.
more.
Yeah, powerful question. Men are needing the same thing, absolutely. And there are men that have tapped into it beautifully. However, on a collective level, I think it's part of our task as being embodied as woman to reflect the truth of the feminine, for man to truly get it, for man to lay war down. So, because there is such an ingrained matrix of the patriarch, I feel that sisterhood is required for us to be able to lean into and lean on our sisters to uphold us to this truth that we know is wanting to express through us. And there's so much work to be done to dive into the deep, into the darkness of the feminine mysteries, for us to really get a sense of our ecstatic belonging, to really inhabit ourselves in our being as well as in our body, to really come back into, like right into the back of our body. Many of us can root into our hips, root into the earth, but can we root fully back into the back of our body and sit in that power?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that Marie, you might want to say something about this question that I had before I go on. I'm just aware you didn't get to say anything. Do you want to comment on the masculine? What does this gender base that we're talking about ultimately?
Yes, I think it has to do with a balance that has to be restored
Mm-hmm.
on Earth or in the universe, not just on the physical plane. And due to the fact that what is missing is the feminine energy, and this is clear. Is why is primarily our job to correct the balance right now. And I don't see the sacred feminine as something that's purely to do with women at all. I do believe that there are men that understand exactly that there is an imbalance and that have actually balanced the energies within themselves as well. So no, I don't think it's a gender-based thing. I just feel that more women are in tune with this need of the world to recalibrate and to regain the balance towards more of the feminine, because this is where Earth has basically gone wrong in the past centuries, in a way that there's so much hurt that is actually felt more amongst women.
Yeah.
And the way we treat the earth, our connection with nature,
Mm-hmm.
all of what we're observing with climate change and how we live our lives is because of our disconnect with the divine feminine.
And the wholeness, like that's how I really see the disconnect, is the forgetting of the wholeness, that
Mm-hmm.
the natural world is a reflection of who we are and what we are, just as much as vice versa. And it just, I think, today I had something posted on Instagram about the patriarchy, and really holding it as it's not about men, it's about a mindset. And it's the imbalance of masculine energies, not about men, but men have fallen in that category because chop wood, bring it in, wash dishes. There's been gender orientation to what we are, our roles in society. So maybe what we could do next is talk about, what does the imbalance of feminine energy look like? And we talked a little bit before about there's a competition, there's all sorts of things, but maybe you both could layer something on here about, what does it look like when we're out of balance with our feminine energy?
I think one of the most obvious things is, like Hualani said, that the earth is bleeding currently. The whole planet is not doing very well. And I for sure know, as a child, since being a child, I've felt this pain. And I think it is the feminine that feels the pain. I know that if I see stories about how the earth is treated and mistreated, and especially animals, I can cry for days. And there's so much hurt coming via the planet into the feminine consciousness. But I feel this is one of the ways in which it is embodied. Is that there's this hurt that we cannot describe. And this is one level of it, is that the planet is being mistreated due to patriarchal ideas, or due to the masculine power over ideas, that we have to basically domesticate the planet and the living beings on it, which is not the truth that the planet needs in order to thrive. So, if there's something you want to say, Hualani.
So there's, in addition to what you said, there's colonization. There's the way we do business, which is very penetrative and mass production and anchored in greed. instead of the natural flow of creativity through each person or each team of people, so that not only does it allow us to thrive in our life, but also gives back to the planet and gives back to humanity in a way that life is wanting it to give back. Like there's a wholeness and a harmonization within that creativity, when often it's more about what do I want to give instead of what does life want to give through me. And then another piece that's rising up for me is the way we birth incoming souls.
Oh,
And
yeah.
what we've bought into in that process of giving birth that's been institutionalized, that has negated the wisdom of our own body to really open and drop the baby through. The way we conceive, like it's an act to further our ancestral lineage, versus a mystical union of an explosion of a new universe for a new soul to bring something new through to the world, free from the woundedness of the ancestral lineage. So if we were to really step back and listen to our bodies and listen to the energy between the two guardians of a soul wanting to come through, what would that look like? And particularly the women who are carrying the gestation in their wombs, to clear the womb prior to conception is powerful.
Yeah, you're really talking
Particularly,
about parenting.
yeah, for these
Conception.
new era babies, for them to really get on with their purpose, instead of having to work through the matrix of the ancestral woundedness first before they can get on with their own pure destiny.
Yeah. So far I'm hearing some themes from both of you around where has it become imbalanced and what are the gifts of the sacred feminine. And I think a huge one that you're both naming is actually being in the body. Like that is a significant part of the feminine power, is actually embodiment, holding the energies, clearing the energies, being in contact with this whole presence that's our physical body, but it's so much bigger than that. So there's something about, like, Hualani, you were talking about, caring for the whole, essentially, when we're talking about the earth. So there's something about attuning. And then Marie, you're talking about from when you were early, and I'm the same way. I have spent days crying when I feel like we have a lot of fires happening in our country right now, and obviously in Greece, it's all over. And the pain of what happens to animals and children and sex trafficking, and like, how do you begin to make sense out of any of that? But to the point that we're talking about right now, I think the summary I was wanting to make is, I don't know how we do this unless we're in our body and in our heart, like what we're talking about. And that seems like a huge part of the journey of embracing feminine power, is actually slowing down what you were saying, Hualani, about recognizing that our world is created on penetrative power. It's just like, get in there, make as much as you can, as fast as you can, but there's not looking at the whole. And I think the other piece that I heard was basically the collaborative flow when you were talking about the earth. And it's like, okay, so what does the whole system need? And we're so far away from that. I don't even know as humanity how and when and if we can actually get back to a level of consciousness where people really are aware that what they're doing is impacting everyone, and it's not all about them and their needs. So any other layers that you would want to add on to the body wisdom and the heart opening
Yes, I would like to add on what Hualani actually addressed now. And she said the act of actually conceiving a child
Yeah.
is something that has become sordid, and in a lot of religions and in society has become something that we think of as a taboo. And that's something I could never understand as a child either, is how people, especially people that I knew from the church, talked about lovemaking or sex or however you want to call it. Because I always felt this is something sacred. And why do you try to make it into something ugly that then will create a wound that we all need to heal from again? When we actually then do engage with the male energy, whether it's to bring another soul into the world or not, but this union of female and male energies is something sacred, and it is not something to be ashamed of, and it's actually something to revere and respect, and that needs to be treated in a completely different way. And there's just small details I remember from growing up is how we were allowed to watch violent movies. Generally, that was fine with society from a certain age, but in movies where a scene of lovemaking was relatively loving and actually harmless, was shut down for us. And what is this balance? That's no balance. Why don't you teach children sex is a beautiful part of life? Yes, treat it with responsibility, all of that, yes. But I feel that comes instinctively anyway. But why do you expose us to violence? This is also something that I feel is totally and completely out of balance. Why should children be exposed to so much violence and believe it's normal? It's also skewed towards male destructive energies. And it's something that never sat well with me either. And growing up, I actually realized that men were always attracted to me in a sexual way. And I'm only now beginning to accept that it is actually not something bad.
Yeah.
Because it has created so much jealousy and so much misunderstanding in wherever I found myself, whether it was in a work environment or in a private environment. And it's not like I chose to be in this body. I mean, consciously as a human being, this is the body I was given. That's maybe the soul journey chose this body specifically, but I think one of the really important healing aspects that we have to do as feminine embodiments is to coming back to be in our body and to be proud of our body, and that and all the power and all the effects it has on the world, including on men, and not to be so scared of it and not to condemn the power that women actually hold, because it's a life force. That's what it is.
Yeah, I really appreciate, and Hualani, I want to hear from you in a second. I really appreciate you bringing this theme in, Marie, because I think it is part of where the sisterhood wound is it's our sexuality has been co-opted in a way where it once is this beautiful way of bringing so much love into our bodies, into each other, whether it's a man with a man or a woman with a woman or whatever it is. And there's a way that it's been so shamed that now it's turned into something that's like an industry that checks people out of their body. So it's the very opposite of what we're saying in terms of the sacredhood is being in the body. Like much of our culture is popping us out. So Hualani, do you want to add anything to this line?
Yeah, I'd love to. From what Marie was sharing there, like there's a big difference between the oogling of objectification and reverence for beauty.
Yeah.
And that's another expression of the imbalance of the feminine dynamic, is we've lost that reverence for the beauty of the expression of the feminine, whether it's through a body or whether it's through art or whether it's the planet in a garden, like all those beautiful expressions. And the loss of our remembrance and knowing that the sexual energy is the powerful energy of creation itself when it's in its pure state. So to come back to what I said earlier about coming right into the back of our bodies to be fully embodied, we have to come through sexual healing in order to really sit in our hips. Otherwise, we're just hitting up against something that's saying, no, no. And we're going, yes, yes. So for our cervixes to really root into the core of the earth, we need to make room for that to happen. And then the other piece is the honoring of our menstrual cycles as a mystical tradition and way of being in the female body that allows us to tune into deeper levels of being, deeper levels of mystery, to follow the rhythmic cycles of nature and the seasons, to know when we need to retreat and be unto ourselves, or when we're free to give and share and create and illuminate. Like there's a cycle to that that keeps us balanced in our psyches and in our bodies. And I firmly believe that if a great percentage of female bodies who are menstruating and or are in their menopausal cycle really came to understand and embody that wisdom, the world would begin to change just by the nature that we're all practicing this at home. We're calling on our partners to assist us during our bleeding time. We're calling on our children to leave us alone when we're in the bathtub with a locked door and essential oils. And corporations that honor downtime in the first day of bleeding or the first 2 or 3 days of bleeding to accommodate that. I know there are corporations out there, particularly in Europe, that are beginning to do that, but it needs to be worldwide. There's so much that we have forgotten that is beginning to resurface, but we're challenged to figure out how to reintegrate it into the life that is existing right now. So my question is, perhaps it's not about initially integrating it into the life we have right now, but more about practicing and intending something new that will begin to shapeshift the worlds that we operate in, whether it's in our home or in a corporate environment or a healing practice, however we may be expressing it. Because I know a lot of healers that are worn out and are not honoring their cycles.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're hitting on one of the biggest points, which is in the patriarchal society, there is no rest. It's just go, 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 just keep creating and doing and consuming and accumulating. And I think the art of resting, whether it's through our menses and the moon cycle, or for men, learning how to rest, like any of us. So Marie, do you want to speak a little bit more about this feminine power of resting, yielding?
Yes, I believe that in a lot of the Western societies, sometimes it feels like being busy all the time and overworked to the point of burnout is like a status symbol. And people feel they can't be respected until they totally engage in their work. And it's destroying people all around me. I mean, I've noticed this since I was very young, how this patriarchal idea of working beyond our capacity is respected and honored so much, which I could never. I always feel, how can you respect something that actually means that actually boils down to the fact that you don't actually respect your own needs? Because just to me, someone who respects what their nature and their body and their mind, for that matter, and needs at this moment is something that I can respect. And someone that works themselves to death, knowing what full well what they're doing, to me is not something respectable at all. This is a horrible imbalance. And I mean, even though we have already proven this with medical research time and time again, is that stress is one of the biggest killers in the world right now. I don't feel there's enough being done to counteract this notion of overworking people, underpaying people, keeping them in a permanent state of stress. This is not how life is meant to be. And I fully feel that I really rebelled against this. I've rebelled against this whole system since I can remember. I refuse to be a slave to some corporation and to sell myself or that. No, it's there is. I think we're still far away from a balance. I think there are luckily there are some companies that actually realize if they treat their employees well, their company actually thrives in a holistic way, not just profit measured, but in a holistic way. Profits often are a side effect of what happens, but if they start measuring a company's well-being in a more holistic way, they really are discovering that they are thriving. And I feel this is also down to us women mostly to reinstitute this balance in the workplace.
Yeah, I feel like you're bringing up two really important points, because there's the systemic, the institutional way that things are built that just basically purport that we are constantly doing, and there is no time for rest. The systems don't make time for rest for a majority of the people in those systems. But then there's also the other layer of our own conditioning around it, where I noticed for myself, I just delivered a corporate retreat over a week ago, and it took so much energy that I was in bed for 5 days after, 6 days pretty much. And I had so much guilt. And I knew, I mean, I was just observing myself. It was like witnessing the collective mind through me, where I had so much guilt for taking time and resting. And I wanted to get myself right back going. And I was watching this occur, knowing that resting was the only thing to lean into, and that is where my feminine power is. But I was blown away at how strong those internalized voices were of me being lazy and, basically what's wrong with me. And I didn't believe them, but at the same time, I felt them energetically and emotionally in my body. So some part of me is still aligned with that. So I just want to acknowledge and say that systems create this and reinforce it, but then each of us, I think, going to a larger topic that we've touched on once before is like the collective movement. How do we help one another do this? And maybe that's where we could shift next, is if we're really rebuilding this world of sacred sisterhood, how do we begin to help each other? What is it? Here's the question. What is it that we have to help each other become more aware of? Where are we out of balance?
I want to answer that twofold. One, back on the imbalance from
Yeah.
what Marie was sharing, another piece of the imbalance is how we treat the elderly. You know, we need to shift that big time.
Yeah.
I'm all for seniors choosing to be in these residences where they're all together, if that's what they're choosing. But often the elderly, particularly those that are not as well, are housed away in these institutions that do not serve them at all. It's a place to go to die. And then to tip into your question, I can feel it shouting up from my heart, and that's, we don't have to do it alone. Which I can feel it vibrating in my body. Goes back to those beginning times when we were hidden away in the forest, working alone in solitude to hide out from whatever was not wishing our medicine to be visible. And I think that lives in us so strongly, the visibility, or not wanting to be visible, and doing it in a solitary practice is so ingrained in our cells and in our psyche that our ability to reach out and ask a sister to hang with us, to hold us up, to support us, to see the vision with us, to magnetize other sisters that are in alignment with that vision, that collective movement. It's like a mantra. I don't have to do this alone. And find the substance within our hearts and our bellies to reach out and say, I need assistance. Or are you with me on this? Can we collaborate, or can we create something bigger together? I need a break from my children. Can you sit for them for the weekend? I've been caring for my elderly mother for 6 months and I'm worn out. I don't know how I'm going to get out of bed tomorrow. I need assistance. Like, the list goes on. We don't have to do it alone.
We have to ask for what we need then.
Yes.
And that's where feminine voice has been diminished.
Yes.
Of you just figure it out on your own. You don't necessarily ask. You have to just do it on your own.
And our voice needs to be heard. It's like I have this vision of standing at the rooftop and just shouting out, I can't take this anymore. This is not the way. Return to nature. Return to the heart, and just call people back, because we know that every human being longs for the depth of what the heart yearns for. Whether they're listening or not, that seed is planted there. It's part of the evolutionary impulse that it is planted there, so that eventually we'll wake up in our journey. But if we allow our message to be strong and rooted and clear, then it begins to resonate. Because if I put it in terms of sound, if we pluck the G chord of a violin, it'll start every string instrument, every G string vibrating. So in our own radiance, we're the vibrating G string.
Yeah, I love that.
I didn't mean it to come out that way, but it did.
That was perfect.
We're the vibrating string. We're the vibrating song.
For the vibrating
So that
G-spot.
yeah, absolutely. And it happens in circles, right?
Right.
When the Shakti is so full,
Yeah.
it wakes it up in every person in the circle without saying a word. So I often say, you don't have to roar to be heard.
So we know that we're not going to change the systems. It
Oh,
starts with us. And
yes.
so, Marie, do you want to add anything on where you feel what we
Yeah.
can do to create more balance?
Yes, definitely. I just also want to say, I totally identify what you were saying, Hualani. I have exactly the same vision. And I think this feeling of wanting to shout from the rooftops, it's okay to ask for help, is exactly what women in this day and age need to hear, and what they all actually are too scared to say and to shout. And it's to regain a balance, we need to change this reality amongst women, especially right now, that and I've always had this sense, and it's growing stronger the older I get, that we are not meant to be isolated islands, suffering on our own, proving to ourselves we can do everything because we are women. Yes, we are strong, but what if we could actually use our strength to change something in this world? And what if our collective strength is so much stronger than we could ever have imagined? Because I remember, in a not brain kind of way, but I remember a time where women were there for each other, where we weren't tired raising children, where we weren't tired being there for our elders, because this was the natural cycle of how it used to be, and this is how it's meant to be. I don't believe that grandparents should be taken away from grandchildren. I don't believe that they should be locked away in old age homes, not having access to children or their grandchildren. I really believe that the cycle of parents, children, grandparents is a cycle that needs to be reunited. And how we will achieve that is the other question, whether we will start projects of bringing grandparents together with small children again, because a lot of what I hear in my circle of friends, and I'm sure it's the same for you, is that mothers feel overwhelmed these days. And it's not fair on the children. The mothers can't help it because the system reality is like that for many of us. But I think one of the solutions is probably the missing piece, grandparents. Grandparents long for interaction with children, be it their own grandchildren or someone else's. They don't mind. Same with little children. They don't mind whose grandfather is that reads to them. And I feel this is something that the world needs to look and take seriously, because it will achieve so much healing in the circle of life. I remember, this is just like a small story from my own life, the time where I really longed to have a circle of women around me, not defining the specific woman that they should be, was when I was pregnant. And the more pregnant I got, the further along my pregnancy went, the more this need came. And then in the hour of birth, I honestly, and I don't want to offend men that attend the birth of their children, but I honestly didn't feel that I needed a man around. I honestly felt that what would give me power now is to have women around me. And this is what was something so instinctual and intuitive that I couldn't even place my finger on it. But I feel that this is a need we all have. And this is something we've stopped listening to. And this is something that we don't even remember how it used to be done in early days. There are some indigenous cultures that still do that, where the mother is supported by a circle of women. But I think this is the way it's meant to be, not just because of physical external things, but because the strength that you get from so much feminine energy around actually improves the birthing process for the child and the mother. I really believe that, even though my the way my son was born wasn't like that. I didn't have many women around. I had two, my sister and the doctor that was present. But when my sister held my hand, I can tell you I felt a totally different power than when my husband held my hand. When my husband held my hand, basically I felt I needed to support him. when my sister held my hand, it physically took about 80% of my pain away. And I couldn't believe it.
That is so powerful.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah.
Thanks for speaking that. It's
Mhm.
powerful.
That illuminates this notion of the collective field.
Yes.
Just having the energy in the space holding. And there is something about the physical. Of course, we can energetically tune into each other, but there is something because of these bodies, like the bodies vibrate to, like you were talking about the G string and, just the entrainment of how being together in a sacred space. And I feel personally that I'd like to be together with women in a sacred space where we're actually talking about our shadows. We're talking about how we undercut each other unconsciously. We're talking about how we're jealous, or because that is where we lose all of our power. And I feel women have been conditioned to do that because of this external messaging that we're not enough. And that this power doesn't really reside in us and amplify when we're together. In fact, it feels like we've been somehow along the way taught that we have to hold this for ourselves. There's like a possession of it. So I wonder if you have any thoughts about that and, where the conditioned blind spots are that we could be working with together.
Wow. We could talk days on that one.
I know. We can just
And
plant the seeds.
I think it's kind of intertwined, like it's these tattered threads that we've woven into the tapestry of embodiment that we need to unravel. And what's coming up for me is that we hold to this notion that to share our traumatic stories, to unearth these challenges that we've been faced with through our life and the life of our ancestors, will be just so overwhelming and bowl us over. And if we bring it back to what Marie just shared, if we can do this together, it's not so challenging to share that deep, dark secret. Because we've got this circle of women that get you, that understand you, that can resonate with the story that you're letting go of, to the point where grace comes in and moves it out without reliving it. I think a lot of women feel that to deal with their trauma is to talk the story out for the next 10 years and relive it until finally they're not triggered by it. And I know that that's not necessary. Through my own work with women, I know that that's not required to heal our deep, dark secrets.
What is required?
What's required is to have an experience of our own wholeness, our own beauty, our own light, which is possible. We can be led into that frequency of our being. And through the support of another woman, another person, it begins the presence of that person being fully present to what we are diving into. It simply begins to move and shift and return, so that we reclaim the power of what was fragmented due to that challenging story. It's like the person holding presence for us hands us a bowl of pure water and says, here, drink. And we can just simply drink it, and it fills our cells, it fills our energetic body with this remembrance of purity, where, it's like shifting through the mud in a river. The silt just settles and starts to sparkle. I think that's the beginning place, is to be with someone or a group of people who can hold presence for us as we tune into it, where it's being held in our body, and it dislodges the crystallization, and it just begins to melt and fall away. It sounds simple. It can be challenging to be in the body in that moment, but it passes so quickly that more often than not, we can't grab hold of it again, because the beauty and the light is filling the space. The power is returning. So we need that direct experience.
Yeah, in the body, in the field, the collective field,
Yeah.
that amplifies it.
And I think the only place, I know the only place that we can do that on our own without the aid of another person, for some of us, is in relationship with nature, like to immerse ourselves in a forest and sit down on the bedrock. For me, it's a rock. It's got to be really solid and ancient to really sit there and just surrender. And then what I've just described can take place. But other than that, I think we need another compassionate human being to hold sacred space and to witness us with their presence.
Yeah, I think that's the key, is it's the presence. It's the presence of the creatrix, life itself, whether that's through a rock or another human. But there has to be enough of a emptiness in the other person without their agendas. That's why it can be more challenging, I think, with humans.
Yes, good point. Yes.
If they're all that conditioning and agenda is coming in, it clogs the field. So
yeah,
doing our own work allows us to be that kind of presence.
The open vessel.
Yeah. Yeah. Marie, do you want to add anything to that? And then, just watching the time, I'll ask one more question, then we'll start to wrap up.
I think there is definitely a body of secrets that the divine feminine can uncover. And I think it happens intuitively. Because I think most of us would love to have like a one-size-fits-all solution for every question we have in life.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what gives us strength as women is that we know the answers come. The answers come to us intuitively. And if we are two or more together, I think this process becomes a little bit easier, because I think we just have it in us that even if we've never dealt with a specific question before, if we dive into ourselves, being this vessel that tries to discover where can we find an answer to what this person is looking for, we will discover something. And if we have no hidden agenda, and if we take ego out of the equation, I do believe that every time we will find an answer. And this is something that is totally against what the male system has taught us, that the answers are actually within you. The answers are within you and within me. And when we are together, it is so powerful that we can actually have solutions to all our questions.
Yeah, when we let go of our secret shames, then the deep secrets of our wisdom can rise.
Yeah.
And I think
Right.
that is part of the huge power of when women come together.
Mhm.
And we've forgotten that
Mhm.
because we focus so much on what you said. We focus so much on competition and jealousy and all these things.
Right.
But we forget, if we subtract those, we just sit still and accept ourselves the way we are. We have so much power. And this is what some of the men that we know are scared of, because they somehow know this. They, in some instinct, they know if a woman can be extremely powerful.
Yeah. Being with our whole body wisdom is so powerful, no matter
Yeah.
what gender, but particularly, I think the piece that's standing out so strong for me. And I hope that you guys will come back so we can do, you gals. That's the funniest term in America, you guys. I'm just aware that that came out of my mouth. I, I would love to have you back because I think there's so much more here. But Hualani, you just said, I can't remember the exact language, but like we can't really touch that unless we remove these layers of shame, which is why I have such a strong desire to bring women together to talk about the shame, to talk about how it feels to be threatened and jealous and feel less
Yes.
than and give our power away to try to please people or take power from other people to try to prove our value. I mean, certainly men can be talking about the same thing, but there's something so potent about actually normalizing that our brains do this, not just because of our lifetime, but our ancestral and the collective mind control that has happened with the feminine understanding of one another.
Absolutely.
So here's my final question. And I'm thinking of women who have had a lot of wounding around the feminine, myself included. Like growing up was a very, very painful place, constantly projected upon in ways that wounded my heart very deeply. And so I wonder what you would say to women who are rebuilding trust in other women, of how to open the doorway to heal together.
I would say that the journey is always through shadow work.
Mhm.
I think it always starts by admitting we are ashamed of this and this.
Yeah.
We don't speak the truth about this in this situation. We don't admit to how unhappy, for example, we are in our marriage. We don't admit to how overwhelmed we're feeling being a mother or taking care of our parents. I feel this work starts through the shadows. And by illuminating the shadows, we realize we don't have to be afraid because we're all there together. Not everyone has this, it's collective. The shadow work that we do for ourselves, we do for every woman next to us as well. If we don't fear the truth any longer, then we are free to talk.
Yeah.
So by starting to open up about what it is you are going through and what it is you are feeling, know you're ashamed to admit, this is where it starts. This is where the process started for me years ago. But I started going into the feelings that are actually hid very efficiently under the carpet.
Yeah.
To go to a therapist, and I went to a female hypnotherapist, and I started uncovering and having the courage to uncover the layers and look at, why do I not want to talk about this issue in my life? Like, where does it lead me?
So powerful. I want to add one layer, and then Hualani, I want to hear from you. I feel so much resonance with what you're saying, that it really is entering through the shadows. And I think one of the biggest pieces that I feel is included in that is having conversations about what we're identified with, because these stories become so real. And it's like really working with our conditioned mind, and not just I think if one woman is courageous enough to say, for example, when I feel jealous of someone, this is what I do, is I make them wrong. I make fun of them in public, whatever that is. Then now we can move to the conditioning that's underneath it, because it's so easy to identify with those things, which creates shame, which means we stuff it inside, but it's not who we are. It's just part of that conditioned collective mindset that has kept us repressed. So I think it's so potent what you're sharing, and I second that. Hualani, do you want to add anything?
In order to not recreate all of what we've experienced so far, I feel that when we come together, there must be an agreement amongst us that holds a sacred container for truth, love, non-judgment, no gossip. In other words, what is stated here stays here. And hold firmly to those boundaries and address it when someone usurps them. Because we can't really be completely vulnerable until we have a sense of safety in our being and in our bodies. So there's a period of establishment of that trust in the circle in the beginning. As you get to know each other and come to trust each other. And then just be in the flow of what's surfacing and understanding that whatever one person is speaking is resonating with many, triggering something in many in the circle. So there's a stirring of the mud and a lifting of the mud, and then having the tools to bring that to completion before you leave and go back home into your everyday life.
Yeah, beautiful.
And also have a vehicle for follow-up too. So like, for example, if you're coming together once a month, things are going to rock during those weeks that follow that time together. So there needs to be something in place to support each other for when something is really rocking, when something has been deeply stirred.
Yeah.
But that's the real work, to really embody our radiance. We've got to stir the mud that's in our bellies.
I love this. Yeah. I think it is. You both are speaking the same, and I'm agreeing 100%. Stir the mud, bring the shadows, hold it together, create sacred space, bring presence, own your projections, own any subtle agenda you start rising in you, because it serves the whole. Yeah. Oh, I think we need to see the wolf as we start to wrap up. Can you bring the wolf into the picture here? Tell us just tell us a little bit about your wolf dog. Speaking of feminine power, I'd love to hear something about her as we wrap up.
It's a him.
Oh, it's a him.
Yeah.
Sure. Interesting.
But he watches my every move every day.
Uh-huh.
And he adores me. I don't think there's anything in this world that adores me more. He just turned 12. He was one of a pair. I had his brother as well. I had two boys.
Wow.
And he died of cancer, the other one. This one is the younger one. So there was a period of adapting to me as opposed to his brother, because he followed his brother wherever the brother went. And then when he passed, this one was 7, and he had to adjust to life and started following me, and he never left my side since then.
Wow.
But interestingly enough, I've gone through a lot of hardship in these previous years, and he's been my amazing support system, because I got divorced and I had to support my son, and I sometimes felt, how I'm going to do this by myself.
Mm-hmm.
But having this wolf energy around me kept reminding me of my strength and that I can actually do all of this.
It goes back to what Hualani said earlier, is we're not alone. And sometimes it's so mysterious how the support comes in, and that we do need to belong. Pack animals, that's most, animals, they have either mated for life or they're parts of a pack. Some are solitary, but we humans are wired for social connection. And so needing to feel that belonging. And I think it's so beautiful. I had a dog that was by my side through my divorce and through big parts of my journey. And it's like, we never know, but if we're paying attention, life does provide the belongingness. And sometimes it's just looks different than we think. So thank you for bringing him into the show today. That was wonderful. Any closing thoughts here from either of you?
Yeah, just step off from what you said about we're not alone, and to remind people that it's not just in the physical people around us, but also in the invisible realms where we spoke of earlier, of the elders, the grandmothers, to call them into connection, to tell them you're listening, to make their presence known, so that you really have a sense of something beyond yourself, to know that we're not doing this alone.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
And in our connection with the planet, Mother Earth,
Mm-hmm.
really deeply rooting into her body.
Yeah.
Because she's listening too.
And all of that requires us to slow down.
Yes.
Which goes back to the feminine principle of resting and yielding.
Yeah.
Because without that, it's quite hard to access heart and intuition and the essence of other loving presence, whether it's in form or out of form.
The sacred pause.
The sacred pause. And so on that note, Marie, do you have any final words?
Yes, because interestingly enough, this year in about March, I had this really urgent and very severe need to delve into something like this, what you're describing, into a restful period. And I knew it's going to be bigger than just a few weeks. Because all through my life, I've never actually been able to define what I want to do with my life in the conditioned way that we are taught to define our career, or however you want to say. Mm-hmm. And I just felt that this year is somehow defining for me, and it will be defining. And for that to emerge, I need to delve into this darkness and unknown and being alone and not being scared to be alone. So this is still a process I'm going through. I'm really very much by myself, and I've been distancing myself from people, and I've been asking for understanding. And I think this is a birth process for me personally that I'm very excited to discover. But I think, generally speaking, we don't get these urges or these feelings just for fun. There's always a reason that can, and we have to honor them.
Thank you for bringing that in, and for your courage to honor the need to just go inward and to let your friends know you're not available right now and it's not personal, and just letting people have whatever journey they have around that. It's so powerful to claim an inner authority in the way that you're describing. And yeah, thank you for doing this and for bringing that piece in. Wow. Well, I hope this is to be continued. And I want to thank you both so very much for your presence and your hearts today. It's been incredible to be with you both.
Thank you too.
Yeah. I hope you enjoyed the show today. If you want more, you can subscribe to this channel. This will automatically queue up the next episode for your listening. If you have a burning question or topic you want to learn more about,
please send an email to Ask Anne-Marie. The direct link is located in the show notes. And please leave a review. This keeps me inspired and focused to bring you more. If you want to learn more about my work as a power reclamation guide, leadership coach, and organizational culture consultant, you can visit my websites in the notes. Thank you again for joining today.